Cleaning this lens on the moving arm, I'm just using some domestic glass cleaner on a cotton bud, doing the inside and outside surfaces. Now bear in mind this is just plain glass, these pieces. There's no silvering layer. If it looks clean when you finish cleaning it, it's clean. There's no magic involved in it. That looks good to me. The rear lens, the eyepiece lens here, something like that, I find the easiest way to clean that is to take a well laundered handkerchief, put a drop of domestic glass cleaner on it and use that to clean that glass. You'd normally end up with a little bit of cotton or something on there. That's not at all unusual, but that'll blow away. So I will bring in my rangefinder, which I've already got back from the ultrasonic cleaner. Let me check that rear group, the eyepiece lens. Make sure there's no dust on that surface that I've just cleaned. Now this is plain on one side, convex on the other. The convex side goes inwards to the rangefinder. The plain side is on the outside. Just put this little mask on the back to hold it in place. Now take great care when you're handling the rangefinder not to touch the mirrored surfaces. If you touch the mirrored surfaces, you won't like it. The results are not good. The frame line mask can go back in, and that had a small shim underneath it. Which typically in production line cameras that was locked in position with a touch of paint, and I notice with interest that that's not happened here. Tighten that down. I'll just look through that, see I can see that my frame lines all look good. They look good to me. And so the moving arm can go back on. Now lubrication, I want to put a bit of lubrication on this. So take a bit of molybdenum paste once around the inside of that, and this surface where it contacts the body of the rangefinder, normally I'll give that a light white too. Getting this in place is awkward. That spring certainly wants to push me away. I'll just put a touch of molybdenum paste where that spring's going to run, which is down this little channel, this groove here on the arm. I can hold that arm all the way across against that spring tension. Put our bush into place. I'm going to give it a light wipe around the outside perimeter of that bush where the wavy wash is going to run. If I can find the screw, I'll get that in position too. Run that down, check that the arm moves smoothly, and it does. take my spanner, tighten that screw up. If I was just using a stiff pair of tweezers, that would be acceptable too. Now I can check the rangefinder by looking out the window, and I can tell you that it is nice and bright. It was quite hazy before, now it is clear and bright. The adjustment at the infinity end of the travel is it comes back beyond infinity, which means most likely that that bush that was in there is in a different position than where it was previously. Even though it appears to be a circular bush, with that cutout in it, it acts almost like an eccentric, so that's a slight annoyance. But I can adjust the position of the arm here at this point to adjust its stop position. And so I'll just run that screw in slightly, and that should sort that out. Let's try that. A little bit more. And I want it so that the rangefinder images will come back to the infinity position, not come back beyond infinity, because there's no future in that. That should be fine. Now I can fit this to the camera. Fitting the rangefinder back to the camera body. Normally I put a little wipe of molybdenum paste over the cam surface here where it couples with that stud on the camera. Then I use a couple of dots of lacquer where the rangefinder mounts, so that once it's screwed down tight, it's reluctant to move. Rangefinder settings are often lost on cameras when the camera is being dropped, and it's because the rangefinder has actually shifted on the camera body. They're not pinned into position with dowels, they're just held down with screws. There's always a little bit of play. Just check that that arm's correctly positioned, and it is. Run that screw down and drop its mate into place. This one I've got to drop in from the top just because it's inconveniently placed. Normally that goes well. I can see it did go well. The screw is sitting exactly as it should do. Check that that's nice and firm back against the back of the casting. Here's the line on the casting you can pull that rangefinder back snug against. Make sure both screws are done up tight. And then I've got to check for adjustment. Well, the vertical alignment's very good, the horizontal alignment's out. That doesn't surprise me much. So I'll adjust this, and the horizontal alignment, the adjustment screw. This is the lock screw. I'll undo the lock screw. This is the adjustment screw. That's quite tight. That's just a, it's a rivet more than a screw. It's an eccentric. Try that. A little bit more. And what I'm doing, I'm adjusting the infinity position so that as the focus scale ring is revolved towards the infinity position, the images in the rangefinder of an infinity target meet at exactly the point the focus scale ring reaches the infinity position and not before. That's good. Well, I'll go and check the close focus settings now. Just cleaning the top cover. The rangefinder is absolutely fine, no problem there. And the top cover I'm just cleaning with a bit of naphtha. You can see I've removed the shoe to make it easier to get to the top cover for cleaning. This is very clean. Normally cameras accumulate a line of grime along the bottom of the chrome there where it sits down into the camera body, and that will be just finger grease and dust and dirt and things of that nature. But this shows none of that, which again points to it never having been used much, if at all. There's a bit of dirt coming off on here. That'll be handling. That'll be because people have handled it to look at it, to take it out of their display case and fondle it, but it doesn't look like it's ever done any hard work. And I'll wipe the inside of the top cover. Particularly around where the glass is going to sit. That looks pretty good. So cleaning the glass. Well, I've got two pieces of glass in the top cover I need to deal with immediately. One is the meter viewing window for the meter needle. Now I've got to clean that very gently. So I don't want to scratch that. That's actually plastic, I think, anyway. So you don't want to mark that. Do not attack it with a solvent. That's much, much better. And the eyepiece window, which of course is it's not a lens, it's just a plain piece of glass. It's easy to get to the outside surface. That's in good order. The inside surface is a bit trickier to get to. That looks good. The accessory shoe. Well, usually if a camera has seen much use, there's usually a layer of grime underneath this from things that have been spilt on the camera that have run underneath it. But there's no sign of that here. So the chrome is less than, the shiny chrome shows a bit of grime to it. Nothing horrendous. So most of the retinas I'm working on are retinas from the, I suppose, the mid to late 50s. This camera is 20 years newer than that. And it's still an old camera. That looks good. The glass for the windows. I will clean these with glass cleaner, and I will use a well laundered cotton handkerchief. Normally these windows in the viewfinder are very grimy. Often they're hard to clean because they've got quite an oily deposit on them where they've been touched and then wiped off, and everything's got down under the edge of the glass, and they're generally pretty grimy. These are great because they're like new pieces of glass. They're not all filthied up, and so as a result they're easy to get looking virtually perfect. So I'll slide these back in position. There's a bit of dust in that top cover there. I'll just dust that out. I don't like the look of that. It's almost inevitably, if there's dust in there, it will find its way to somewhere I don't want to see it. So we'll get rid of that. Get that glass down into position. They're sometimes a bit awkward to seat, particularly if it's an older camera and it's got a dent in the front or something. It's hard to slide them down into position. They don't want to go. That appears to be okay. I'm just checking that they're down. Just pushing at them with that clean handkerchief. That's the top cover, but there's still one more thing needs to go in there, and that's this. This is the rubber buffer that sits inside the end of the top cover here and bears on the end of the meter here to hold it firmly down in position. And this is distorted. It's an odd shape. The glue's obviously given out. I'm not convinced that it was ever sitting in the right position. I think it's fell out of place when they were installing it, and it looks like it's been twisted. I can tell by the shape of this. That's the indentation of the surface of the meter here and over here. So it's had a twist. I don't know how well that's going to go back in place. I've got to glue that back into position. Yeah, it's certainly twisted. Yeah, it had rotated completely inside. It was facing the wrong way. I'll glue it back in and I'll struggle to see if I can get that back correctly positioned, because I don't want to be making additions and alterations to this camera since it's somebody's museum grade specialty. I'll glue that in, and next time you see me we'll be putting the meter shutter release and everything else back in the top. Well, I think that I'm pretty much ready to put the lid on this now and see what happens. The only thing I haven't tested is the action of the frame counter to see if that behaves itself. We shall find out. I expect I'm correct, but you never know. Any movement in the arrangement of the shutter cocking rack can affect that. Now that's not seating correctly, so something here is not right. Lift that back off. Shutter release is right. Frame counter's film release button looks okay. Let's try again. That rubber pad looks. That meter, I don't like the way that's seating. I'll just check that. That's better. Let's try this. No, it's not seating correctly here. There's something funny going on. The meat is not staying seated correctly as I get the top on. So that rubber pad that's designed to hold it down in position is shifting it, I think. That's it. The top's on. Right, let me try the film advance lever. Yes, the frame counter is good. My glass is looking good. While I'm holding this down, I'm going to put a couple of screws in there because I suspect I'm not going to be back in. Let me just put one screw in there and one screw in at the end here of the top cover. And let me evaluate this and see if it's to my satisfaction. That film release button looked a little bit interested in sticking down. It seems to work smoothly. Yeah, the button does want to stick down. What's going on there? We know that the strap lug had been pushed in at this end slightly, so it's possible that the top is slightly skew off. Which way does it want to go? Backwards. That's seating correctly at the moment. You can get very subtle differences in the seating of the top cover. You'd think that, you know, it's got to go back in exactly the same place. It screws down. It must be good. But when cameras have been shipped, sometimes things get pushed. They just get shifted very slightly. I've seen cases where something sticks or doesn't work. You loosen the screws, look, there's nothing wrong with it, put the top back on, do the screws up, there's nothing wrong with it. And all it was something was distorted and the screws were just holding it out of line. And I'm just sort of getting used to the feel of it, making sure that it appears to work as I expect. It all appears to be good. Oh, we're starting to run out of things to put on this now. The rewind, the film rewind button, rewind knob, and then the meter dial needs to go on. So I better get them sorted out. Well, the rewind knob, let's have a look at that. Well, it's a bit grimy looking. I'll just wipe that with a bit of naphtha, see if that brightens up. Yeah, it does. Look at that filth coming off there. So it wasn't supposed to be yellow. It was just covered in probably what amounts to grease. I won't use anything stronger than naphtha for cleaning this because there's a great likelihood that if I took to it with anything more energetic, I would strip the paint off that knob, off the markings, so I don't want to use anything else. Yeah, it's hard to say. I'm sure that the wavy washer here really doesn't feel like it's got any grease on it. I would expect to see more grease on the inside than the outside if it was a problem with grease. I think some of these just handled that with dirty hands, left that quite stained. So, putting the rewind together, the rewind knob together. In this case, normally I start with this piece, the centre, and normally it's got a recess on it that the spring will drop into. In this case, the recess is in this section. So we'll put that, I'll put a little bit of grease on that wavy washer, we'll put that in place, put the centre in, take the screw and run that into position. That should be done up tight in there. Just checking that the film reminder dial, the film type dial does revolve. It does. We're left with some residual marks on that dial, but I don't think they're going to go away. So we've got our that little piece that goes on there, and then the rewind knob, check that it extends correctly and drops back into the body correctly. Put something through the fork of the rewind on the inside, just tighten it up with my fingers. That's the rewind knob. The exposure meter. Now the knob for that. Now the knob for that was stuck in place when we started off, and it was just stuck there basically with dried grease. So I'm making sure that the knob on the top of the meter itself is clean and that this is clean inside and out. There's no obvious problem there. It's not as though it looks like it's got something nasty on it. It doesn't. This knob is a very tight fit on there. This piece here is a tight fit on the inside of this knob. Again, that suggests that the camera was made up out of spare parts, as the story goes, and it suggests to me that the reason those spare parts were on the shelf is because they were no bloody good. They'd already been rejected in the production line at some earlier stage, but were too good to throw away. Effectively, they were pushed back to the back of the shelf forever. The wavy washer is pretty clean actually. It's not showing any great pile of sticky grease. So I'll just wipe a thin smear of synthetic grease on there. The film speed dial, I'm just looking closely here to see, make sure we've got a full complement of parts. I think we do. The film speed dial is quite clean. Certainly there was not excessive grease in there, if there was any at all. This goes in, you can adjust the position of this, but I'll start it right there. When I say you can adjust that, you can make a very slight adjustment to the meter readings by moving that. It's no good, it will not compensate for dying selenium cells. Although when I was young and stupid I thought that was the case. You can make slight adjustments. Slight adjustments in the order of half a stop this way or half a stop that way, and you would still remain roughly useful in a useful part of the range of your meter. But the selenium cells are dying now. I don't know what the state of this one will be like. I might test this and report back. It may be fairly good. If the camera was assembled in 77, that meter may have been made fairly late in the piece, and it may be better than the current ones that I'm normally seeing about. Right, I have my screwdriver. I'll run that screw down. Nip that up tight without going crazy. I'll align that dial where I think we should be starting from, and then I will go and test this. That's probably a good spot. I'll report back. Well, I've had a chance to check the exposure meter. Unfortunately, it's no good. It's at least a good stop out in bright sunlight. I haven't bothered testing it across the rest of the range. There's no special reason to believe it'll be useful at any given point. But that having been said, we have a nice, clean, tidy, otherwise working example of a very rare camera. And this one will be winging its way back to its owner sometime fairly soon, and I'm sure they'll be very pleased to see it back, because I've had a few impatient emails wondering where it was. Thanks for watching. I've enjoyed having the chance to look at one of these, find out exactly what was involved in them. I know a lot more now. I know that they may have been the last Retinas made, but they were no gem. They were made up out of bits, and those spare parts were probably spare parts left on the shelf for a very good reason. They weren't any good. Thanks for watching.